Mosaic, a daily news program from Worldlink TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Welcome to the News in Brief from Abu Dhabi TV. 4 U.S. soldiers were killed and a fifth was injured in a separate attack in Iraq. Police in Fallujah demonstrate in front of the general headquarters of the U.S. forces, demanding their withdrawal from the area. In Botswana, Bush finally admits that his forces are facing problems with the resistance in Iraq.
There's no question we've got a security issue in Iraq. And we're just going to have to deal with it person by person. We're going to have to remain tough.
A French court decides that British Airways must pay 1.67 million euros to 7 passengers who were taken hostage by Iraq after their aircraft landed in Kuwait in 1990. Hamas renews its commitment to a ceasefire, and Sheikh Yassin says that Israel's refusal to release prisoners will lead to its failure. Dahlan confirms that he will be meeting with Mufez this evening to negotiate Israeli withdrawal and the issue of prisoners. Today, a special military court sentenced the former head of the Jordanian intelligence, Sameh al-Battihi, to 8 years, accusing him of corruption. However, the current head of the Jordanian intelligence reduced his sentence to 4 years. Al-Baradei reaches an agreement with Iranian officials to send an additional team of experts to Tehran to address Iran's fears about renewed nuclear inspections. And Iran denies Rumsfeld's accusations about moving their border positions several kilometers into Iraq. There has been a return to calm in the streets of Tehran after clashes between police and students who are calling for democracy. Members of the People's Mujahideen organization protest in front of the Italian parliament, calling for a regime change in Iran. 3 American soldiers were killed and a fourth was injured in 2 separate attacks. Meanwhile, the demonstrations protesting the U.S. presence in Iraq are taking a dangerous turn. And Washington is trying to have other countries help cover the costs of war, to include human and financial contributions. Meanwhile, there are rumors in Iraq that the overthrown President Saddam Hussein has been spotted in the neighborhoods of Baghdad.
The U.S. Army announced that 3 American soldiers were killed in the suburbs of Baghdad. Meanwhile, the policemen in Fallujah, a city that has now become a stage for the armed attacks against the American forces, demonstrated, demanding the withdrawal of the Americans, who are becoming a real threat to them. Also, threatening to submit a group resignation if their demands were not immediately met.
We are demanding the withdrawal of these forces. We also ask that they leave within 48 hours. If they don't, then we will quit our job, which provides services to the citizens. The police are a service agency to this society. I want to add that we don't want the complications that are being caused by the coalition forces, putting an obstacle between us and the citizens.
The anti-American sentiments are increasing in Fallujah and in other areas in Iraq, in addition to a feeling of frustration that increases with each day due to the U.S. inability to restore the basic services in Iraq. Frustration is the major factor contributing to the developing resistance, which presents a dangerous threat to the coalition forces' security. The U.S. officials admitted that they are facing an organized resistance from different groups, including Islamist fighters, supporters of Saddam, and armed gangs, as well as Iraqis seeking to avenge the death of their relatives.
We demand the withdrawal of the American soldiers from the residential areas. They are killers and occupiers. They murder the innocent.
Demonstrations protesting the U.S. presence in Iraq continue, and the U.S. officials admit that they are facing a real security problem in the country, adding that their troops remain a target of attacks carried out by supporters of the previous regime.
U.S. President George W. Bush said steady attacks on American troops occupying Iraq meant they had to remain tough and stay the course. Bush told reporters at a meeting with Botswana President Festus Mogae that there was no question that U.S. forces had a security issue in Iraq. Asked whether the attacks were making it more important to catch Saddam Hussein, Bush said that once again, the apologists for Saddam Hussein are bringing misery on their country. But he said the United States was making steady progress.
Well, let me start with Iraq. Having talked to Jerry Bremer, the man in charge of the civilian operations there, he believes that the vast majority of Iraqi citizens are thrilled that Saddam Hussein is no longer in power. Secondly, there's no question we've got a security issue in Iraq, and we're just going to have to deal with it person by person. We're going to have to remain tough.
Bush also vowed to help Botswana, which is battling the world's highest rate of HIV/AIDS, and all of Africa to turn the tide on a disease he called the continent's deadliest enemy. Bush spent the first 2 days of his 5-nation African trip in Senegal and South Africa, wrestling with trouble spots, Liberia and Zimbabwe. His Botswana visit focused on U.S. plans to boost trade and provide AIDS assistance. Almost 4 months after the United States and Britain invaded Iraq, a senior British official said it would be extremely difficult to find banned weapons they said justified war. The British official, who has closely monitored Iraq's military capability, said it was more likely Iraqi scientists or army officers would eventually come forward with evidence to support the U.S.-British charges instead of leading them to the weapons themselves. However, Prime Minister Tony Blair's spokesman insisted weapons programs and products would be found in Iraq. The failure to discover such lethal arms in Iraq has raised questions about the case for war. The row has undermined Blair's credibility and dented his popularity. The BBC said senior figures in London no longer believed banned missiles or chemical weapons would be found in Iraq. Some observers have detected a tactical retreat in Blair's references to weapons programs rather than just weapons. Iran has firmly denied an accusation by U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld that it had moved some border posts several kilometers into Iraq. U.S. officials wary of predominantly Shiite Iran's influence among Iraq's Shiite Muslim majority have frequently accused Tehran of meddling in Iraq since the fall of Saddam Hussein. Iran vehemently denies the charges. Rumsfeld told the Senate Armed Services Committee there had been reports Iran had moved posts several kilometers inside Iraq along a 25-kilometer stretch of their frontier. In the United States, a 60-year-old writer and publisher has been arrested at his Chicago area home on charges that he provided information to Iraq's intelligence agency about Saddam Hussein's foes. Khalid Abdellatif Dmesi, a Jordanian who has lived in the United States for about 10 years, was described as an unregistered agent for the former Iraqi government who reported on Iraqi exile leaders and gave press identification cards to Iraqi intelligence agents. Dmesi is being accused of working for at least 4 Iraqi intelligence officers, one of whom was expelled last year. Prosecutors believe that Dmesi is the Serhan mentioned in a dossier seized in April from an Iraqi intelligence service safe house in Baghdad. Dmesi's lawyer says that his client was merely a journalist, not a spy. Dmesi was president of Around the World News Incorporated, established in 1998 to print and distribute periodicals in Arabic and English.
An Egyptian military delegation was meanwhile to hold more talks with Palestinian officials and resistance groups, which they helped persuade late last month to call a 3-month ceasefire. The delegation would hold a joint meeting with Fatah, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad representatives to be attended by Prisoners Affairs Minister Hisham Abdel-Razak in Gaza City. There would be also separate meetings with 8 smaller Palestinian factions. The Egyptian team won assurances from Hamas and the Islamic Jihad on Thursday that they remained committed to the truce, although Hamas leader Sheikh Ahmed Yassin warned his group's patience was limited.
Hamas assured once again its commitment to the ceasefire during the meeting with the Egyptian delegation in Gaza, but yet it warned that the 3-month ceasefire truce may collapse if Israel does not meet Hamas demands. The Palestinian group wants Israel to release a substantial number of its members held in Israeli prisons as agreed upon in exchange for a continued ceasefire. General Mustafa al-Buhairi and Mohammed Ibrahim of the Egyptian delegation are there to try to cement the ceasefire and bolster internal Palestinian dialogue. Hamas says its patience may not last much longer.
We are going to be patient, but patience is limited. The Israeli enemy should be committed to the initiative declared. They should implement our conditions in order to avoid a return to the past.
The Egyptian delegation was hoping Palestinian factions would prolong the truce to a 6-month period. Hamas and the Islamic Jihad say Israeli Premier Ariel Sharon is not taking sufficient steps. Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas also blamed Israel for violating the truce and threatening peace, but said all parties are committed to the truce and will continue to be. He feared that if Israel sticks by its refusal to release detainees, the two groups might cancel their 3-month truce.
This is off limits. If the Israelis do not release all the detainees without twists and turns, then farewell to the truce.
Fatah movement was angered by Abbas over his way of handling negotiations, since till now he was unable to return Palestinian rights. Yet it rejected Abbas's resignation from the Central Committee of the party. Abbas said he would not resign from the government. Hani al-Masri, an official in the Palestinian Information Ministry, said that Abbas' resignation offer had brought into focus divisions within the leadership, but said it is too early to say that there is a major crisis. The Egyptians also met with Fatah leaders after meeting the heads of the Palestinian security services. But whatever the compromise that might loom, Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank who march the streets daily demanding the release of all the estimated 10,000 prisoners will not settle for less than that.
And days after the attack, which killed 14 Russians at a weekend rock show, an explosive device went off near a restaurant in downtown Moscow early Thursday, killing a state security service expert who sought to disarm it. Police sources said a woman tried to bring a rucksack with what appeared to be an explosive device into a restaurant in Moscow's main thoroughfare and tried to flee when the restaurant security attempted to search the rucksack. The woman was reportedly apprehended. Police said the device contained an equivalent of 2 kilograms of TNT, which they said left an expert almost no chance of survival, even though wearing bulletproof clothing. Moscow blamed the attacks on pro-independence Chechen fighters. UN Atomic Energy Agency Chief Mohammed al-Baradei left Tehran without securing Iran's authorization to immediately conduct tougher inspections of its nuclear program, but said he termed a day of open, direct and constructive talks. The two sides agreed to hold more talks on the issue. Iran's Foreign Minister Kamal Kharrazi told al-Baradei that his government needed to convince the nation before signing the additional protocol. Iran has said it would agree to additional inspections if it is granted access to advanced nuclear technology as a signatory to Non-Proliferation Treaty and as an IAEA member. Iran accuses Washington of using its influence with other nuclear-empowered nations to block the sale of such technology. North Korea's chief delegate Kim Rong-song for inter-Korean talks said the communist country was ready for either dialogue or war, a day after South Korean intelligence service reported the North had reprocessed nuclear fuel rods and tested fuse mechanisms for detonating nuclear bombs.
North Korea opened talks with South Korea on Thursday, saying Communist Pyongyang sought a peaceful resolution of the nuclear crisis, but was prepared for war if the United States resorted to use of force. Ahead of the talks, Kim Yong-sung, chief North Korean delegate, urged cooperation between the South and North to prevent war on the Korean Peninsula amid the crisis over the North's suspected development of atomic bombs. Kim's South Korean counterpart, Unification Minister Jong Soo-hyun, said a solution to the nuclear issue required the participation of the international community, not only inter-Korean cooperation. The opening of the cabinet-level talks was overshadowed by revelations by South Korea's intelligence agency that North Korea has reprocessed a small portion of its 8,000 spent nuclear fuel rods.
We have had a report which estimates North Korea has recently reprocessed a small number of the 8,000 fuel rods it was keeping at Yongbyon.
The 8,000 spent fuel rods were part of a plutonium-based nuclear weapons program at the Yongbyon nuclear site that was frozen under a 1994 nuclear deal between North Korea and the United States. The pact unraveled this year after U.S. revelations of a covert North Korean scheme to enrich uranium for bomb-making. U.S. officials said Washington still has questions about North Korea's nuclear fuel reprocessing activities despite the South Korea intelligence report. In recent months, U.S. officials have said they detected activities at the Yongbyon site, including near the holding pond where the spent fuel rods were stored. U.S. officials have long said they believe Pyongyang has produced 1 or 2 nuclear weapons, but reprocessing could provide fuel to rapidly expand that arsenal. The talks in Seoul, the 11th round of inter-Korean ministerial meetings since 2000, are expected to focus on implementing North-South transport and industrial projects agreed in 2000 but delayed by political disputes. About 100 anti-North Korean protesters gathered near the venue for inter-Korean ministerial talks on Wednesday, criticizing the communist country's nuclear development program. The protesters burned large North Korean flags and carried a giant mock nuclear missile during the protest. Among the protesting crowd were families of abductees to North Korea, waving their fists and chanting anti-North Korean slogans.
Muslims from around the world will be present on Thursday in the Spanish city of Granada to watch closely the opening of its first mosque since 500 years. The opening of the mosque is the result of 20 years of effort by the southern city's Muslim community. The Spanish city of Granada is preparing for the opening of its first mosque since 500 years ago. The new mosque was built in the historic Moorish quarter of Albaycin. The mosque complex includes an Islamic center, gardens and a terrace looking out over the Sierra Nevada mountains and the Alhambra. The opening of the mosque is the result of 20 years of effort by the southern city's Muslim community, which acquired the site thanks to a donation from Libya. 500 years ago, Granada was the capital of the Moorish kingdom of Muslim Sultan Boabdil. In 1492, Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella took control of the Alhambra and forced the Sultan to hand over the keys to the citadel. The new mosque spokesman, Mohammed Azmil, said the mosque is the proof of a lively Muslim community in Granada, open to Spain and Europe.
This is a very important event because it's the first mosque built and sponsored by Spanish Muslims. It's the first mosque built after a few centuries. Spanish people were the promoters of this temple, not in terms of financing, but with everything concerning the project and the construction. This is the proof of a lively Muslim community in Granada, open to Spain and Europe.
The city has an estimated Muslim population of 15,000. After Libya provided the initial funds, the project was taken up by Sheikh bin Mohammed al-Qasimi, the Emir of Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates, who contributed with most of the $4.5 million needed to construct the mosque. Other Muslim states, notably Morocco, Brunei and Malaysia, also contributed money. Muslim pilgrims from around the world will be present at the opening ceremony and to watch closely what some call the event of the century.
I've come especially from Malaysia for the opening of this new Granada Mosque because I feel that it's the most significant event in this century, after being more than 500 years of no building of any mosque in Granada or Spain for that matter. Being the first mosque being built here right in Granada is especially emotional and significant. And I cannot express the happiness and joy with this opening.
Iranian twins Laleh and Ladan Bijani, joined in life, arrived in their homelands in two coffins on Thursday, achieving their dream of separation, only in death. Their bodies arrived at Tehran Mirabad International Airport, where a large number of grief-stricken Iranian people, as well as several top officials and representatives from some Tehran embassies, were awaiting to embrace the two. A memorial is to be held for the late two sisters in Tehran Thursday night. On Friday, the bodies will be sent to Firuzabad village in the southern Iranian province of Fars, where they will be laid to eternal rest. Moscow supports cooperation between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Alexander Yakovenko made the remark Thursday in his talks with two reporters, and termed as positive talks between IAEA Director General Mohammad al-Baradi and Iranian officials in Tehran. He also added, Moscow calls for Iran and the IAEA to enjoy permanent contacts. Speaking on Iran-Russian nuclear cooperation, Yakovenko reiterated there is no major drawback in that respect. He also said once the Russian environment experts conclude their researches, an agreement will be signed between Tehran and Moscow on returning to Russia the recycled fuel delivered to Iran. This is while Russian Atomic Energy Minister Alexander Romanetsev, too, commented Thursday on the recent visit to Moscow by head of Iran's Atomic Energy Agency, that is organization, Mohammad Aghazadeh, and describing the two sides' cooperation as transparent, put emphasis on continuation of such cooperation until Bushehr nuclear power plant's first unit goes on stream. Meanwhile, during the day, President Mohammad Khatami, addressing a huge gathering of Karaj residents, reiterated victory of Iran's Islamic Revolution, blessed the Iranian nation with a new spirit of hope to establish a modern and a spiritual society, and that a heavy responsibility lies ahead of the state officials to realize such hope. The chief executive went on to say there exists a relatively large number of problems in the society. However, as he added, national achievements in various arenas should not be underestimated. Enumerating some of the measures taken by the government to improve the national economic condition, President Khatami said the government has rushed to the help of the impoverished classes of the society via balancing the tax rates, and adding, setting up of the foreign currency reserve fund can be assessed as a successful bid to increase the national economic growth, and that the government is pressing ahead with its efforts to decrease unemployment rate.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,